Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answers they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here from YouTube user Snoops12345. And Snoops asked us, can an employer, whoa, what are we doing here? Can an employer say, coming back from a work injury, that they cannot accommodate restrictions when the same restrictions were previously accommodated before the surgery because work is slow and the supervisor is on vacation? So probably not, but let's dig into it a little bit further. The easy answer is usually no. Usually they can't do that. However, I'll give you an example. If you're coming back from surgery and you had accommodations before, and you're coming back from surgery and the employer's like, we can't do those accommodations anymore, and you're rightfully asked, why not? And they're like, business is down 10% and it's going to cost a little bit of money, and we don't feel like we can afford that right now. Probably they're going to get knocked around by any court or arbitrator you take them to. Like that's probably not going to fly. Counterpoint, let's say you're coming back from a surgery, you had your accommodations before, and you're coming back, you're like, I need my accommodations again, and they say, listen, dude, we would love to accommodate you. Man, woman, whatever, doesn't matter. We'd love to accommodate you, but we have lost 90% of our business in the past 3 months, and we've had to let everyone go. And the people we used to use to accommodate you, they're not here anymore. And we just don't have enough hands, and we don't think that reasonably we can accommodate you any longer. That argument could carry water for them. That could win, right? And obviously these are two polar opposites. Like we're really these are far away in terms of the spectrum of what's going on, right? And that's by design, right? I want to make the situations very, very far apart so they'll be clear cut. The tension becomes in the middle, right? Where does a slight downturn in business that should not impact the accommodation change into, oh my God, this business is like in trouble, or just doesn't have the resources they once had, and what was previously reasonable is no longer reasonable. And that's always the tension in these cases, right? Because what set of events, what set of changes in the business or change, whatever it is, trigger that flip from like, this was reasonable to this is not reasonable. And the answer there is it's different in every single case. And you won't find out unless you litigate it. And then the people, the decider, so the judge, the arbitrator, the jury, who ends up hearing your case, the administrative law judge, whoever it is, will make a decision. Is it reasonable or is it not? And only then would you actually know who was right. And part of you right now might be saying, that sounds insane. How can there not be a bright line rule? How can the system be so inefficient that we have to litigate this out to find out? That's the legal system in the United States. I mean, to some extent, right? These laws are written in a way where uncertainty is embraced, and there's a certain amount of what we might call fuck around and find out drafted into the statutes, and that goes for everybody, right? Like, if you're asking for an accommodation and you don't know if it's reasonable or not, it can be a tough road if the employer decides it's not reasonable, and then a judge, a jury, an arbitrator agrees with the employer. That can be really hard, right? By the same token, it can be even harder for an employer who's like, hey, that's not reasonable. We can't do that. No way. I know we used to give you that accommodation, but we can't do it anymore. Well, if they're wrong, and they won't know until a finder of fact decides, right? If they're wrong, boy, I'm going to leave a mark. It's an expensive day. Generally, it's much, much, much cheaper to accommodate someone than to pay out a settlement in this field, or worse, a verdict, right? Verdicts tend to be much larger than the settlements in this field. Usually, not always. Now, that inherent tension, the uncertainty, is daunting and scary and bothers a lot of people a great deal. Humans, many humans, hate uncertainty. They hate living in the gray. They want absolutes. Of course, real life has very few absolutes. Lots of gray zones. So many gray zones. And that hate for uncertainty, that desire for absolutes, is what drives the settlement rate in this field, especially around accommodations, but around most of the protected classes. A lot of employers and a lot of plaintiffs and a lot of attorneys on both sides don't especially want to find out what some judge or jury or arbitrator thinks about a given case. There's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't. Juries are kind of wild things. They listen to, 30 seconds out of 5 minutes of testimony, and then they decide your client's life to the tune of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars in either direction. That's horrifying. That's horrifying, right? Think about that. Someone was casually, almost dozing off the entire time you made your case. And then they decide your life. A key moment in your life, a pivotal point in your existence is decided by someone who probably wasn't paying all that much attention, no matter how hard attorneys on both sides tried to do a little song and dance and keep their attention, right? I mean, that's scary. Arbitrators are way better. And arbitrators who make bad rulings tend to not get as much work in fair settings. Now, arbitrators in settings like New York City, if they find against the city too often, might find themselves, hypothetically, kicked off the arbitrator list for New York City employees, right? I'm not saying that happens. I'm saying that a lot of arbitrators think that happens. A lot of defense attorneys and a lot of plaintiff side attorneys think that happened in New York. So that's scary, right? It's not true of a mutually agreed upon arbitrator that comes to a situation fairly. But sometimes when you have institutions, county, state, city governments, you find against them too often, they stop calling. And you lose that sweet, sweet $1,160 per hour. Right? It's a real difficulty to be impartial when you're going to lose that sweet, sweet $1,160 per hour as an arbitrator, right? It's a concern, right? Judges can be great. They can also be power mad despots, right? So I'm taking a very long time to kind of just go over all the fact finders here. At the end of the day, everyone's a little worried about every case. There's no case that can't lose. And sometimes you see the absolute most garbage case win, right? That happens. 30 attorneys will turn down a case, and then the case wins for $2 million. That happens. That can happen. That's a reality. And you look at it, you're like, how did that case win? This doesn't make any sense. That plaintiff was throwing ninja stars at active warheads and running around playing catch with fully armed mines. This is what? How did this win, right? Well, the jury might not have listened to that part of the case. They just didn't listen. So the case won. Is that wild? Is that terrifying? Sure. Is it unfair? Yeah. It's not an ideal result. I'll tell you that right now. I'm getting a bit far afield in your question here, Snoops. Let's pull it back. I mean, your question is, can they choose not to accommodate you when you had the accommodation before? And the answer comes down to, if they think they can prove it's no longer reasonable given a change in circumstances, they might be able to. But that is a tough and risky argument to make. And generally speaking, I would probably say the odds are at least slightly on the side of the plaintiff in that scenario. It's much easier to argue, hey, they did this before and it works out great, than it is to argue, okay, listen, we did do it before and it did work out great, but things are different now, and here's the very complex and boring reasons why. One of those arguments is way easier to make than the other. And easy, simple arguments are sometimes more likely to win than complex arguments. Because again, not every fact finder is listening or understanding everything that gets said, right? So, generally speaking, I think you're in a good place, and that's why I say probably they won't get away with it. But as much as I want that to be the entire answer, which is probably they won't get away with it, I have to give the whole answer, which is, but in certain situations they could. And the more extreme the situation is, the more likely it is that they might. They might risk it, they might try it, and they might get away with it. So you need to think long and hard about the situation and like what has actually changed. And let's be clear, like the supervisor being on vacation, that's not going to cut it right off the bat, unless that is an extended vacation to a pig farm that the supervisor is never coming back from. That's not going to cut it, right? Like if that supervisor's gone for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, figure it out. People go on vacation. It doesn't. A supervisor going on vacation does not excuse an employer from the federal statutes for disability discrimination that require accommodations, reasonable accommodations be granted, right? That's just not how this works. But work is slow. I mean, how slow? How slow is slow? You know, I mean, listen, if you work in a nightclub and serious disease breaks out and nobody can go to nightclubs anymore, well, work is very slow now. And for a variety of reasons, they might be able to say, hey, we can't accommodate you. And part of why they're confident in doing that is they can't accommodate anyone because they don't have the ability to bring people to work anymore, right? Like, obviously, again, with the extreme situations, but like it could happen. There's scenarios where it could happen. Generally speaking, your position is probably stronger than theirs, unless stuff is a bit extreme, in which case, think it through, and you're gonna look at it and be like, yeah, okay, maybe I should consider the strengths and weaknesses in my case and consider potentially settling if that's and if that's the right thing for me. Me being Snoops 1 2 3 4 5. I hope I talked around. I always try to do this, and I don't know if it's the correct approach. I try to give the full talk around to a topic, right? Because I don't know your situation, and I don't know what changed. I don't know how slow is slow in terms of the work. I don't like all these things. I don't know the details, right? So what I'm trying to do is talk around the possibilities of the situation, give you kind of like the totality of how I would approach a situation like that, and how I might try to approach evaluating that argument, and hope that it arms you to do so yourself. And if that's not working, let me know, and I will try a different approach. But I hope it was, and I hope this video was helpful. And if it was, like, subscribe, comment down below. Helps our channel to grow. Remember, almost everybody works, but not everybody wins. Be smart out there. I hope you get that accommodation. Take care.